Hello everybody, Treno here, and welcome to episode 2 of our series looking at German tanks that I think should be added to War Thunder. If you haven't seen the first episode, I'd recommend you go and watch that, where we covered the Daimler-Benz Panther tank, the Flammwagen Auf Panzerkampfwagen B2F, and the Stug 4. And in the comments, a lot of you gave very good suggestions for German tanks that I should look at. I'm still gathering sources on a lot of those, so you should start seeing them being covered in the next episode. But anyway, let's take a look at the tanks we're going to look at this week. For the first German tank, we will be looking at the Panzerkampfwagen to Ausf L. Lux, which was the most advanced light tank produced by Germany during World War II. This tank came about from a need for an improved light tank, including fixing the glaring issue of only having a one-man turret. Something that German medium tanks had done away with well before the war, but for whatever reason German light tanks still seem to retain. The resultant design used the same suspension and hull design as another experimental light tank, the VK 9.01, with the MAN company designing the chassis and Daimler-Benz designing the superstructure and turret. When it was put into service, the Lux was designated as the Panzer II-L, even though the Lux was a new tank and was far more advanced in various features. The main armament of the Lux was relatively light, using the same 2cm KWK-38 as used on the original Panzer II, given an in-game penetration of 31mm at 500m with HVAP rounds. In addition to the main armament, the Lux was also fitted with one 7.92mm MG34 machine gun in the coaxial position, useful for dealing with soft-skin vehicles and enemy infantry if for whatever reason the main cannon was inoperable. Armour was greatly improved over the base model Panzer II, having a maximum armour thickness of 30mm at the front and 20mm for the sides and rear, compared to only a maximum thickness of 20mm on the Panzer II-C. And although the Panzer II-F did have a similar armour thickness to the Lux for its frontal hull and sides, this wasn't uniform for the whole of the frontal hull and side of the Lux. One of the other big changes to the Lux is the addition of a new engine, the Maybach HL66P water-cooled 180 horsepower petrol engine. This greatly improved the mobility over the regular Panzer II, with the Lux having a top speed of 60 km an hour or 37 miles per hour, compared to the Panzer II's 44 km an hour or 27 miles per hour. The Lux is also fitted with interleaved road wheels and the slack track system for its tracks, which is basically there are no return rollers for the top of the tracks, which is something it has in common with the Panther tank and many German half-tracks, which is also not entirely unusual because of course MAN did design the Panther tank. Importantly, crew complement is also increased over the regular Panzer II, with the Lux having a crew of 4, consisting of a driver and radar operator in the hull, while the commander and loader are situated in the turret. This helps with survivability in game, and in real life drastically reduces the commander's workload, as on the Panzer II he would have had to do reconnaissance, operating the gun, and directing the tank all by himself. Like I said, it's a bit odd that the light tanks still had this issue, because of course German medium tanks had fixed this issue by having 3-man turrets. Ultimately, while the Lux was an improvement over the regular Panzer IIs, only 100 of these tanks were ever actually made. Some of this may be down to the fact that it was produced by MAN, who of course at this point were more focused on Panther development and production, but also the fact that while the Lux was an improvement over the Panzer II, it was only marginally so in most cases, and with its light armament was still somewhat unsuited to anything but unopposed reconnaissance work, which may have been a factor in halting production. Despite the low numbers, these tanks did serve on the eastern and western fronts, and 2 of them still survive to this day. So the Lux may not have had the most successful career in real life, but how would it play in War Thunder? I could see it being in a similar battle rating to the Panzer II-F at 1.7, but placing it on the tech tree itself might be a bit more difficult. Perhaps it could be added between the 2 Panzer IIs and the Panzer IV-C, but with a lower battle rating than the Panzer IV-C. Alternatively, it could be added as a premium or event tank, though personally I would like to see it added as a regular tank. As for how it would likely play very similar to the Panzer II-F, as it has the same gun and very similar armour, but with its extra speed and crew it would be more survivable and better able to carry out scouting duties. Plus, it definitely scores some plus points in the looks department, which is of course always important on a tank. Overall, I think it would be quite a fun recon vehicle, albeit one that is held back by its weak armament. The next vehicle we will be looking at is the RSO Pak 40, a rather interesting improvised tank destroyer. This vehicle came about from attempts to solve the issue of moving heavy anti-tank guns through the muddy and snowy terrain of the Eastern Front, which, as you might imagine, caused merry hell for wheeled and even half-track vehicles. What the Germans came up with was mounting the 75mm Pak 40 onto the Raupenschlepper Ost Prime Mover, or RSO, which was a fully tracked vehicle used for carrying and towing equipment across difficult terrain. By mounting the Pak 40 to this vehicle, the Germans now had a quick and expedient way of moving anti-tank guns across the battlefield, and work was begun on allowing the anti-tank gun to fire while still mounted to the RSO itself. Now, this became much more important when it caught the attention of Hitler, who considered this to be a very high priority and wanted it ready for production as soon as possible. After the testing of prototypes, the vehicle was ordered for mass production, but for reasons unknown, only 100 of these were ever made. Now, as to be expected, the Pak 40 is the main feature of this vehicle, giving a penetration of 135mm at 500 metres with APC-BC shells, meaning it can do a good amount of damage to enemy vehicles from a long distance. However, as you might expect, the RSO, considering it was a vehicle used for moving supplies about, is more or less completely unarmoured apart from the driver's cabin, and I'm not actually sure if that's armoured to be honest. So pretty much any enemy tank or aircraft will be able to destroy you with no difficulty. Naturally, this would require you to attack enemies from the flanks or in ambush situations, preferably from behind or under cover to avoid return fire or attracting the attention of enemy aircraft. Mobility isn't a particularly strong suit of the RSO Pak 40, which is kind of ironic considering the whole point of creating the vehicle was to more effectively move around anti-tank guns. But unfortunately it only has a max speed of 17 km or 10.5 miles per hour, which is pretty slow and will limit your options in battle. Though of course you will at least have no trouble getting across rough terrain, which I suppose ultimately was the aim of the vehicle rather than being super fast. Now, the crew would be either 4 or 5 men, as while most sources do agree on there being a driver, gunner, loader and commander, some also mention a co-driver, though it is possible this is just where the commander would sit when not in combat, thus not actually being an extra crew member. But like I say, I haven't found a source that actually clarifies that for me. So where would the RSO Pak 40 go in War Thunder? In many ways it would be a slightly inferior Marder 3H, as they have the same Pak 40 gun while the Marder 3H is much faster and better protected, which is also complicated by the fact that the Marder 3H is folded with the original Marder 3, which is a 2.3 vehicle. Potentially the RSO Pak 40 could be added just after the Marder 3, though it could be seen as a downgrade by many. As for how it would play, it would need to be played as more of an Overwatch vehicle, as you won't be able to quickly relocate like with other tank destroyers, and of course you will be extremely vulnerable to almost any kind of enemy. But if you do get a good position on the battlefield, you can use your powerful weaponry to quickly reap the rewards from destroying large numbers of enemies, many who probably won't even be aware of your presence if you are hidden well enough. Overall, while it would be a bit of a difficult vehicle to get a grip of, I think it could be quite successful in War Thunder, albeit while being outmatched by other tank destroyers. Now, those of you who watched the last episode may recall I talked a bit about the Stug 4, and how it was the last major tank featured on the initial release list for Germany that still hasn't actually been released. However, there is one minor variant from that list that also hasn't been released, and that is the Stug 3C. Now, the Stug 3C is in many ways very similar to the Stug 3A, having the same armament, mobility and crew complement. However, there are some minor differences that set it apart from the Stug 3A, primarily in the upper superstructure. Now, as you can see when looking at the Stug 3 head-on, it has this rather glaring weak spot on the left of the hull, which leads directly to the gunner's position, because there's the gunner's optics, there's the gunner behind it, and in real life this position was completely open. Shrapnel and bullets could just go straight into there, but for whatever reason in-game it is just modelled as solid armour, And obviously this was a bit of a weak spot that really seriously needed fixing. And of course, shells that hit here would also be directed towards there, which is even worse. And so what they did was they redid the front of the upper superstructure. This is a Stug 3F, which is also got additional changes, such as the main gun. But you can see here they have added in a periscope position. Now, of course, this is also open, and is also just modelled as solid armour. In real life, they added this position to the left here to stop shrapnel coming in from the left, and because it's a little lower down from the hull, it's very unlikely to get shrapnel from the right. You can also see they've completely redone the areas on the right and left here. Now, of course, on the Stug 3F, they are a bit more up-armoured. I'm not entirely sure if this was the case on the Stug 3C. And the reason they did this was not necessarily for armour protection, although that was a factor, of course, as well, but also because it's just a lot simpler to make. We've only got 2 bits of metal there, whereas on the Stug 3A, you can see it's a bit of a weird shape that obviously is just simpler to have it as one piece of metal. And also you can just see how the periscope would operate on the Stug 3C. Again, just using the Stug 3F to demonstrate that. But of course, how would the Stug 3C actually play out in War Thunder? Well, first of all, I think the Stug 3A should be remodelled so it actually has this weak spot. Like I said, at the moment it's just solid armour. And the Stug 3C should be added with the weak spot fixed, and it should be folded with the Stug 3A. It will play pretty much the same, it will probably be the same battle rating. Honestly, there won't be a huge amount of difference in how it actually plays, but it would be nice to have the Stug 3C in War Thunder, because like I said, that is the last sub-variant of a major vehicle from the initial release tree that hasn't actually been added yet. So it would be nice to finally get the initial release tree more or less finished, other than, of course, the Stug 4, which we looked at in the last episode. So that's it for this episode on German tanks. I'd like to hear in the comments your opinions on these tanks, and also suggestions for other tanks that you'd like me to look at. Like I said, I did get a lot of suggestions from the last episode. I'm still just trying to track down sources to actually properly do those vehicles, so hopefully I'll be able to start covering them in the next few episodes. Anyway, that's it for today. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. I've been Terreno, and I'll see you next time.